This is how you cross over from Israel to Gaza, and right now we're in no man's land. Prime Minister, do you now regret when once asked what your favourite joke was, you replied, Nick Clegg? And Deputy Prime Minister, what do you think of that?
Mr. Trump, why should you be president? What makes you fit for the role? Is it just one big ego trip?
Thank you very much.
People aren't sure they can trust what you say. You say things and then it turns out that they're not quite what you said. My name's Andy Bell and I've been a journalist for over 30 years. In this podcast, How Did We Get Here?, I try to provide context and background to what's happening in the news. Now, we can't really ignore coronavirus, but for this edition, we're talking about how one of our nearest neighbours, France, has been handling the crisis. Much of what Britain's put in place in terms of the lockdown has already been in operation in France for some time. So what can we learn here from their experience across the Channel? And how do you say lockdown in French? I've been speaking to Elaine Cobbe, a journalist who's lived in Paris for more than 20 years and who currently works there for CBS News. She spoke to me from her apartment in the city.
I'm speaking to you from my home office. Now, I always work from home, so it's not a huge difference to me, but I usually get to go out more. I get to go out and meet people, and now that is not happening, and that makes it kind of tough.
Okay, whereabouts in Paris are you?
I'm in the 17th arrondissement in the Batignolles, which is a very nice boho area. We have lots of cafes and restaurants which are all closed, which is heartbreaking. And they've closed even our covered market, which we kind of hoped might sneak through the latest ruling closing all the open markets. But all the markets in Paris are closed now.
Without being brutal about it, all the lovely things about Paris are basically shut right now.
Absolutely. The restaurants, the cafes, the cinemas, the parks, the museums, the art galleries. Yep, all gone. The opera, the music, it's all closed.
Okay, well, let's get into some detail about this. When did this happen? Because I think President Macron went on TV and basically told the nation, right, this is coming.
Yes, he did. There had been, similar to what we've seen elsewhere, requests for people to stay at home, strong advice to stay at home. They started by banning gatherings of more than 5,000 people, then 1,000, then 100. Then they closed the schools, and then the president and the government, well, the president said, look, we need to do more, and we just had this wonderfully sunny weekend, and everybody was out and about, ignoring the the recommendation, very strong, strict recommendation to stay 1 meter apart. And the Prime Minister went on TV on Saturday night at about 6 p.m. local and said, seriously, you are all having way too much fun. You are not paying attention. I'm shutting all the restaurants and bars from midnight, which was just a few hours later. So that was a bit of a shock to all the restaurants and bars. And then a few days later, we were told we are now in lockdown. That went into effect on March 17th. And it's been beefed up ever since. You are only allowed to go out if you have printed out and filled in a piece of paper that they have sent us, which is a form saying why you're going out. There are very strict reasons for which you are allowed out, which include essential food shopping, to visit a pharmacy, medical appointments, or if you are helping out in the hospital or in voluntary work, helping people through this crisis. And you're only allowed out once a day for an hour maximum. You're also allowed out for exercise, solitary exercise, no meeting up with people.
And you have to print out that bit of paper each time you go out?
Yes, and date it and now put on the hour, because they were reckoning that a lot of people were kind of going out and saying, well, it's a nice day, I'll just stay. Nobody has stopped me.
And you actually have to put a time on there because it's meant to be only an hour that you're out for.
Exactly, so that if you're seen out there longer, the police can fine you. The fines started quite low. They're now 1,500 euros, so that's a serious chunk of change if you're caught outside.
I mean, when you've gone out with your form, because I'm guessing you have done on occasions, do you expect that a policeman or woman is going to appear suddenly and say, right, let me see your papers?
Well, journalists have a special exemption as we are considered one of the essential services. So my press card and a form stamped and signed by my employer will allow me to move around. Obviously, one doesn't want to do it too much. Now, I went out a couple of times. I went out to the market in the early days to see, are people respecting the rules. And in one market street, they clearly weren't. And that's a further restriction. I never saw any police around there at all. Later on my way home, I passed a foot patrol. They weren't remotely bothered about talking to anyone, but people were keeping their distance. I also saw one police car, but nobody came near the market street, which I would have thought was a prime place to remind people that they should be at home.
Do you know anyone who has been stopped and asked to produce their bit of paper?
Oh, yes, several people. And one woman said her printer had died. And so she found herself with a half-printed form. You know, when the ink runs out and it's sort of barely legible, and she was sort of writing it in. And the police said, OK, really, you need to do something about that. So she was then online finding out who sells printers, and because really only the supermarkets are still open, she did find one of the supermarkets that had printer ink. There has been a run on printers and ink because of this, by the way. Amazon have said it's one of their top 4 requests from France now.
And did she get off when she produced her half-printed bit of paper?
She did. They're generally pretty good with people the first time who are clearly making an effort. But the police have said that there are many people who are just totally chancing their arms and trying to say, oh no, I've only just come out, or oh, I didn't know, or does it not, I only live over there. And, they're saying, seriously, no, you need to have this bit of paper.
OK, and what about movement sort of out of Paris, say, if you wanted to go out to the countryside? A lot of people, have, second homes out of the capital. Is that just banned now?
Well, you see, you used the wrong word there. If you want to do it, you can't. If you need to, you may. So if you need to go to the countryside to look after your aged parents, or many people last weekend were leaving saying, look, the shutdown happened so fast, we didn't have time to organise ourselves. We didn't have food for the country house, which we wouldn't go to yet. So now we're going. And that was okay. But as a general rule, they're saying, seriously, do not just go away for the weekend because you fancy a weekend away. If you're going because you want to settle there because you're really sick of being locked down in the city, that's fine. Go and stay there. But people going to the train stations, for example, they were all checked before they ever got near the building. You had to have your form, you had to have proof of where you were going, and you had to have a ready-bought ticket before you were allowed in at all.
Wow. What about if you're trying to escape in your car? I mean, are there sort of roadblocks?
There are at some areas, yes. They were doing that at the weekend. I don't know that they do it during the week. But the rules are pretty much the same, that you're not supposed to be driving around. So in the countryside, for example, along the coastline, a lot of people thought, well, the beach is open and empty, so that will be fine. And people were stopped because they said, seriously, you're spending too long here. You're clearly out for leisure rather than actual exercise. One woman I saw on French TV said she was meditating, which was her exercise. And the police kind of said, yeah, it looks like sunbathing, frankly. That's not allowed. And now many of the beaches have been closed. Down by Marseille, across Brittany, they're just closed.
Now, another thing that people have been talking about here about France is kind of troops on the street. But it is the case that there's been military on the sort of streets of places like Paris for a while because of terrorism, isn't it?
Well, yes, the heightened security measures are still in place. In Paris, it is mostly police rather than military. And the military are deployed in train stations, airports, but then they already were as part of the Vigipirate heightened security measures. There are more police on patrol in areas, I think, where they expect there to be more problems. For example, in some of the popular suburbs north of Paris, for example, where there are a lot of people who live in high-rise blocks with little facilities around, low-income families who might not have computer access for the children to do their online schooling. And they're having trouble keeping the kids at home. And the police are having trouble persuading families that they need to stay indoors.
I mean, how have things been? That's the banlieue, they're normally called in France, aren't they? How are things going in places like that? Has there been trouble? Has there been sort of confrontations with police?
There have been mild confrontations of the level of, I fail to see why you're stopping me, Mr. Policeman. There's no love lost between the communities there and the police. So it's added to friction more than anything else. There's been no serious problems. And in general, people are being fairly civic-minded. It's a case of reminding people that this is a wider social problem and that it's not just I feel fine so I can go out.
I mean, I was going to ask you, how are it's impossible to say, of course, how are the French reacting? But how are the French reacting? Are they dealing with it? Because, it's not necessarily what you might imagine, fun-loving Parisians to put up with this kind of curtailment of their liberties very easily.
No, and the French are very individual, and they are very, they're great at complaining in general. But once there's a crisis, the French are just fantastic. They pull together, they knuckle down, and they go, okay, what do we have to do to make this work? And there's an awful lot of solidarity out there. People who wouldn't talk to their neighbours from one end of the year to the next are putting up notes in the hallways to say, hey, I'm free to go out and buy food for you if you can't get out. There's been a call for people to help out in the hospitals with the elderly, with providing meals on wheels. And they've been inundated with people and others who are offering up their apartments if they've gone to the country, and they're offering their apartments free to health workers. Similarly, people who have holiday rentals, and of course all the tourists have fled, there's a platform for them to offer their apartment free of charge to health workers so they can be nearer the hospital, because of course many would live in the suburbs and would normally commute in, and obviously they would want to stay as far away from public transport as possible because it's just so risky.
So is there a bit more of, I don't know, some of the sort of social barriers have broken down a little bit, some of the sort of barriers of what's considered correct behaviour have broken down a little bit?
Yes, I think they have. Also, because at 8 o'clock every night, people now get out on their balconies, go to their windows, and they clap and cheer the health workers to say thank you. And again, that's prompting conversations across streets, across courtyards that, again, people might not have done before. And there's also an understanding here, I think, that we're in this for a longer haul than the 2 weeks that were initially decreed. We're looking probably at 6 weeks. In fact, the government is set to announce what exactly it's planning within the next few days. And I think so long as we can buy fresh food every few days, people are just that bit happier, because separating the French from good food is just a terrifying thing to do. Then you really would have trouble. Yeah,
that's the government's priority by the sound of things. I mean, what do people think about the way Macron has handled it? Is it helping him at all, do you think, in the way he's perceived?
It helped a bit at first, but there is criticism about how he's been kind of giving these long philosophical addresses to the nation about how we must all do better and we must do this. And even the very first announcement of the lockdown, he didn't use that word. He left it to the health minister to say it's a lockdown. And he's leaving it to the Prime Minister to say...
Can I ask, what is the French for lockdown?
Well, it's confinement, which just makes me think of pregnant ladies in the Victorian era. But anyway, so yeah, he didn't use the word. The health minister had to do it. The Prime Minister has been the one who's giving all the bad news, but he seems to like that role. He's like, you are all bad children and this is what you have to do from now on. You can no longer do this or this. Remember what you were doing last week? Yeah, that's gone too. So that is happening more and more. It feels like every time I see the Prime Minister pop up on TV, I'm like, oh, now what? So,
yeah, this is going to be bad news.
Point where everyone's going, do not touch the dried pasta yet. We'll be getting to it soon.
Okay. And what about and in terms of Macron, people are just reasonably positive. You were saying they're a bit fed up with him sort of making long rambling speeches.
Yeah, he's champion of long rambling speeches, but they have very much appreciated his European initiatives, and particularly when he stood up to Prime Minister Boris Johnson and said, seriously, You people need to lock down, or we will close our borders with you, and we will take the rest of Europe with us. Because, yay, you're no longer members, and B, you are really, really stupid. Will you stop this? And, the Elysee did not mince their words at all when asked about this. They said, oh, no, we threatened them because they needed
Sorry, just to interrupt. The Elysee is the French presidential palace, so that's the president talking. So what did they say?
Yeah, so the Elysee Palace presidential staff are saying, yeah, we had to threaten the British so that they would do something.
I mean, that's interesting because over this side, it was sort of half reported and there was sort of half forgotten that that had happened. But as far as the French government is concerned, they told the British, get your act together or we're shutting the border.
Absolutely. Yes, that's what happened. The French said, we will shut the border. We can and we will, because if you're not going to follow the rules, if you're going to put our lives at risk, then we are just shutting down. And, don't forget, it's not just airplanes. It's much easier to shut down airports. But the Eurostar has trains several times a day. There's one an hour most of the time. And that's far too easy to bring people over to France with coronavirus. And there have been a lot of concerns in France about how the nearest neighbor to the west was just ignoring the coronavirus pandemic for so long.
I mean, that was going to be my next question. What do the French think of the way Britain has been handling this?
They really feel that the British were sticking their heads in the sand and ignoring it. And Boris Johnson was likened to President Trump on many occasions, just saying, seriously, what is it with those two that they've decided they don't want this to happen? So they just say it's not really that bad. And they're much more concerned about the economy than about people. And the whole argument about herd immunity, it took quite a bit of explaining to the French, because they're going, OK, I think I understood that, but he cannot possibly have meant we're happy to let hundreds of thousands of people die so that hopefully some people will be immune. And it's like, yeah, actually, that is exactly what he meant. They're just not saying it quite so bluntly. And people here were just stunned and shocked.
Right, I don't think Boris Johnson's not here to defend himself. I'm sure he would take a different view on that. But that is it's interesting to hear that's the way the French looked at it. And do they feel we're getting our act together a bit more now?
Yes, there was a lot of noting that Britain decided to implement pretty much exactly the same rules as France, apart from allowing two people to meet up. We've been told do not meet up with anyone who's not already in your home. When you're allowed out, it is not a chance to meet up with friends or family. If they're not already in your home, they're not in your circle. Go away, leave them alone.
Yeah, I mean, there are still a couple of things here, like parks and gardens are still open. I think they're closed in France.
Oh, they're closed in France.
Yeah.
Yes, not a chance.
And you don't need that bit of paper yet to go out and justify why you happen to be out shopping and that you've only been out for an hour, etc. So, but these are things that could be coming.
They could indeed. I mean, the scientists here are saying you need 2 to 3 weeks of lockdown before you can really judge if it's effective or not. And that's why they're saying we would like the lockdown, which is currently set for 2 weeks, we're on day 9, to be extended so that it lasts a total of 6 weeks.
And in terms of the sort of mentality and what the sort of space you're in your heads in France, if I can put it like that, this is just starting for us, and people are just saying, right, well, we can't really go out anymore. What are we going to be feeling like?
I think it's quite possible that you'll have exactly what we had, which is it starts with everyone stay home, please be good, and then it's sunny and people go out, and then the authorities go, okay, you really need to stay home more. And that was a bit of a shock when people went, oh, okay, it's not that good. I remember being on that market street 3 days after the start of lockdown here and thinking, wow, this is almost normal. And I thought, okay, that's just going to prompt everyone to keep going out and go, I can buy fresh food every day. I can call this my daily outing. Not sure I ever bought fresh fish every day, but I'm going out. So I think it's the realization that you don't have a choice that is the worst. Because, there are news cycles where I work nonstop and see nobody else for days on end. But I know they're out there. Whereas now I can't see them. So that's kind of tough. It's also interesting the number of people who are not actually working from home. There are great swathes of people who cannot work and are now blissfully stocking up on books and films to cultivate their minds and all those things, which I have to kill all those threads.
But maybe not able to earn much money.
Well, no, it's it's certainly tougher on them. It will be when it comes to making money. But there was so much talk about, work from home if you can. But it's really interesting how many people, even in sort of officey jobs, who cannot work from home just because of the nature of whatever their company is or whatever decision was taken at company level. People who are working from home are finding it very difficult to juggle family and work. People who are not used to doing it. I was on a conference call last night with someone, and she took the floor just as her toddler decided to come over, grab her earphones, pull at the computer, and she's like totally thrown by this. So, and that's just one of the easier bits. It's things as well like the call of the fridge. Be careful what you stock up on, because the fridge is always there. And when you're bored and pacing around your home, the fridge, somehow all roads lead to the fridge. So stock up on fresh fruit, not on sugary desserts.
All right, Elaine, look, thank you very much for talking to us. And I think I owe you a glass of something nice when this is all over and we can come back over to Paris. And most importantly, stay well.
Thanks, you too.
Okay, thanks a lot. Elaine Cobbe on life under confinement in Paris and what may be coming our way. If you have any thoughts on this or any ideas for other podcasts, please email me on andy.bell@itn.co.uk, and I'm on Twitter at @AndyBell5News. Thanks for listening to this edition of How Did We Get Here? There'll be another soon, and everybody stay safe.